Now we're ready to work on the fins. And in the cutting guide, in the medium weight chipboard section, under the body, there's a side fin. There's actually two of them. And then there's a section called top fins, and we'll cut all those parts, and a section called bottom fin, and we'll cut those pieces as well. And then under lightweight chipboard, there's a section called top bottom fins, and there are some pieces of lightweight chipboard, and you'll want to cut them so that they are flexible on their length, and then score them at 1/8 inch intervals. Now there's a template piece for the fins, and all of these are cut out of medium weight chipboard, and it says how many to cut. Now just a couple tips on cutting. When I cut these fins that have these shapes like this, I cut to the point. Don't cut off the point, but just cut to the point, and then I use my craft knife with a brand new blade in it to start this series of cuts. Now, especially on this top middle one, the cuts kind of come down and then go back up. So when I'm cutting them, and I have this one started, and I get down to this point and I'm coming around this curve, I make sure that I'm supporting this piece up here, because otherwise this corner will want to tear out. So just keep some pressure on that, and you'll have a good sharp blade, and that section will come out. And of course, as with all the templates that we use, when we cut out the templates, we cut inside of the line. Here's one of my cut templates, and you can see that you don't see any of the line there. And then when you draw it out, make sure you again cut inside of the line. You see how there's no line showing here on any of my cut pieces, or very little. And the other tip when I do the side fins is anytime that I have a curve like this, I just use my scissors to do that. You can use your craft knife, but anytime that I have an outside curve like that, I just find it easier to do with scissors. Inside ones, I always use my craft knife. So those are the cutting tips for the fins. So for both the 3 top fins and the 1 bottom fin, they go together kind of like a sandwich. We have the base that goes in the middle, and then each of the side pieces go on either side of that. And we start by just putting one of these side pieces on, and make sure that it is perpendicular there, and let that set up for a minute. So I'll do that. Now that our one side has set up onto our base, we can take our support piece, and we're going to measure and cut some little supports that'll fit up in here into the points of the fins. So just take your piece, and we're going to put it at an angle so it can come into that middle of the point there. And when you cut it off, you need to make sure that you're cutting it off short enough that it won't encroach on the point of this fin. So after you cut it off, just double check that it's not coming into contact with any of the edges here, or it can contact them but it just cannot come past. And then just go ahead and glue that in on the 2 sides, on the bottom and that side, and repeat that for the other 2 points here. And this side that has the long straight angled part here, that's the front, and when we'll put another support piece across that front, and it should sit flush with the edge here, and again not encroach on the point. And then one last short one here at the back, it's again at an angle. So I'm going to set this one aside to dry, And you may see that I have my other ones started here. I like to work all of them at the same time, so that way by the time I finish gluing the support pieces on the fourth one, these should be set up on the first one. That way I can keep moving along with my project. So for the top left and right ones, we have support pieces that were cut a 1/2 inch wide, and we'll just fill in the same kind of way. The front one gets put in flush with this straight angle, and so we have two that are like that, and then we also have this bottom one to work on as well. And once all of your support pieces have set up, you can run a bead of glue along them and the bottom and put the other side. Make sure that you get it aligned evenly with the front side if there's a little overhang on either the back or the front, and then of course make sure it's sitting flush with the surface here on the bottom, that this is all flush here. Put a little pressure on that and check that the front here is lining up, and then allow that to dry and repeat that for your other fins. So now that the second side has set up and is thoroughly dry, we can go ahead and put our top curves on. And these pieces are cut from the lightweight chipboard that's been scored every 1/8 of an inch, just to make it easier to go around these curves. So we'll start here at the back, and the back is this part that's curved, and put that on, and then give it a pinch to form it around the top of that next piece, and then push it in, come up to the next piece and give it a pinch there, and just follow that until you get all the way to the end. So once all my curves were made, I started gluing it on by putting a little bit of glue on the last curve and about 1/4 of an inch down into this second one. You can see it's kind of loose there, and then I've just kind of pinched and held that in place. Now I put some rubber bands out here in case we'll need them as clamps, but I'm just going to work my way around, kind of holding on to the one I put on, and work up and about 1/4 of an inch down at a time. Now this curvy piece was sized to fit exactly side to side here, because we cut our middle sections, support sections, 7/8 of an inch, and then we have a 1/16 of an inch on either side, which equals an inch, and that's the width of our top curvy piece. So once I have that next section dry, I'll just keep moving along. Now when we get to the front end, because we installed this piece flush with these edges, we can also put some glue right here to help hold that on. And then we'll just set this aside to dry, and once it's dry, then we can trim off the excess of the top piece here. And then I'll repeat that process for my other 3 fins. To cover our fins with pattern paper, we're going to first cover the sides, and then we'll run another separate coordinating paper along the top. So here I have one of my fins, and I laid it down on a piece of decorative paper with the wrong side up, and I left a 3/8 inch amount at the bottom, and then kind of roughly traced around, leaving about a 3/8 inch border all around. And then on the side I'm going to put down, I put a little bit of score tape, and then I'm going to fill in with wet glue on the parts where I don't have score tape and go ahead and adhere that down. Now I'll just make a series of slits along here so that I'll be able to fold this down and onto the front of, or the top of my fin. So when I cut my tabs, here on this straight section I don't have any slits, but I've cut a slit that kind of parallels that and comes back here. Then I think you can see I cut a little wedge out, then a whole little series of slits till I got to about here. Then here I've got a cut that parallels this piece and a little wedge out, and then a series of slits, a cut that parallels this edge, a little wedge out, etc. So that when I go to put this down, I'll start so that I can tuck this piece underneath the slits. So I'm going to work from this front end, and I'll just use wet glue to do this. Put a little on there, fold it, and hold it down, and just kind of work my way around. So once I have all the little tabs glued down, I can release this score tape backing on the bottom and put that bottom tab on and give everything a good burnish. Then I'll repeat that process for the other side here, and then for the other ones as well. Now on the left and right on the sides I'm going to use this paper, and on the bottom I think this comes from the 6x6 pad. It's similar to this one, but it's just kind of a darker yellow, so I think I'll use that on the bottom fin on the sides. So I'll get all of my sides covered and then I'll be back. And I should say that when I do the top left and right, that I'll cut out the part that I'm going to turn under or over only a little bit over a 1/4 inch. You don't want to go the whole 3/8 inch because these pieces are not wide enough. We don't want to have any overlap when we have our tabs. So just a 1/4 inch, a hair over a 1/4 inch when you cut out the extra around the top left and right. The bottom piece you can go 3/8. I've completed covering all my sides on all of the fins, and I've done some inking with my inks I've been using, Tea Dye and Vintage Photo, and I've cut some pieces to go on the tops. Now for this blue one, these are all from the 6x6 pad. I'm using this one and I've cut it just a hair underneath 1 inch wide, and then this one will go on the bottom fin and it's a hair under 7/8, and then I don't know, we may need another piece of this, I'm not sure, we'll see. And then to start with, I've cut 3 of the same paper that are just a hair under 5/8 to go on the top left and right fins to go in the center, and I've inked those as well, and then on the back I've already put score tape. And then on the ends, I know it'll take at least one and a piece of another one of this blue, so I've also taken my marker and gotten rid of the white on the edges there. So I'm going to start with this blue one, and I'm going to just tuck, I'm going to start at the back end and just tuck under, I would say about a 1/4 inch just to start with here. Just get that centered there. And then we're just going to wrap. Just kind of keep a lookout at the that you're getting it centered. You may want to put the tape backing down to begin with and come up and see where that crease is going to go, and then take the backing off and move forward like that, one section at a time. And I'm just going to go for a couple sections and see, stop when I'm getting about 1.5 inches from the end, just to see where that's going to end up. So here I am about 1.5 inches from the end, and I still have my tape backing on here. I'll get rid of some of this excess here. And I just want to see where this is going to end up. And it's going to end up down in here, which is just perfect because we can start the next one overlapping that and it won't be very noticeable. So I'll go ahead and finish putting this one down. And now I'll just start this next one right on that down turn right there, and the seam won't be noticeable at all. And I'll continue, and then when I get to this end, I'll wrap underneath here at least 1/4 inch and then cut it off. Now on the top left and right, I'm going to start by turning under 1/4 inch on the front, and the front is the side that has the clean straight angle that's about 5/8 inch long. This little curvy part that's only 3/8 of an inch tall or so is the back end. So start by turning under 1/4 inch on the front, and then again we'll stop when we get about 1.5 inches from the end of this piece. Now I've stopped with about 1.5 inches left. I want to see where that's going to end up. I still have my score tape on the back here. And it comes and hangs over the top of this peak a little bit, so I'm going to cut it so it's short that peak by about 1/8 of an inch or so. And then I'll go ahead and stick that down. So I changed my mind and I stopped at about 1/4 inch short of that peak, and now I'm just going to make a butt joint here because it's not very noticeable with these polka dots, and with 1/4 inch we'll have good bearing there. So I'll just make that join, continue on, and wrap this on the bottom about 1/4 inch or so. Then for the other top side one, I'll do the same thing. Start at the front underneath 1/4 inch, come up and stop shy of this point back here about 1/4 inch. Cut it off if necessary, it probably will be, and then use this short piece to continue on and finish wrapping. And then finally for the bottom fin, we're going to start at the back, and the back again is this short side, and come underneath about 1/4 inch, and then we'll stop wrapping when we get about 1.5 inches from the end to see where we are. So I stopped when I got to this peak, and I can see we're going to be short, so I'm going to cut it back 1/4 inch short of the peak here, and then I'll cut another small length that I can butt up against that and then wrap to the bottom. Now make sure you give everything a good burnish, and then we'll be ready for installation. So first we'll glue our top 3 fins into a unit and let that set up for a few minutes while we install the bottom fin. So these fins line up in the front. They should line up in the back too, but if they don't, just make sure their fronts line up here and that everything is flat onto your work surface as you put that together. And they just get glued up one on top of the next, so just put some glue If you think one side of these small left and right ones looks better than the other, just switch them around. Get that in place and lined up in the front. Put some pressure on that and then put the one on the other side. Now the bottom fin just gets centered front and back, left and right, and put in with some wet glue, and then just hold it and probably let it sit upside down here for a little while till it cures. And then once the fin on the bottom is thoroughly dry, we can turn our fish back to the upright position, and we'll just use some wet glue and go ahead and put the top fins on here, getting them centered. They should just fit inside of that top flat space. For the side fins, I'll first take my peacock feathers marker and color that edge. And then once I have that edge, this is the paper I'm going to use. I'm going to use that on both sides. So I'll attach it to one side, cut it off even, and then attach it to the other side and cut it off even. Once you have your paper on both sides, make sure you've given everything a good burnish, and if you cut into the edge of your chipboard, go ahead and hit it with your marker again. And then I've of course inked the edges, and now we're ready to install them. And let's do a little dry fit first. And the fin goes in this orientation and slips into this slot. And we'll just put some glue in there and just find a position that you like. You don't want to come real close to this. This is the magnet side here, but of course it can slide off to the side this way. So, but just I wouldn't put it super close to here. I wouldn't, but you can have it any way you like. And so just take the fin out, run some glue inside of that slot, and stick it in, and then hold it in the position that you want until that glue sets up. So now we have all of our fins attached.